On the rugged coast of British Columbia, a quiet day on the water for a local fisherman turned out to be a life-or-death rescue mission on a morning shrouded in fog. The fisherman found a baby orca that he had spotted orphaned and fighting for survival. This incredible rescue story would then turn every person into an inspiration. What happened afterward? You simply won't believe what saved the baby orca's life and those unlikely events that would have followed. Stay with us as we tell you this incredible story. The discovery, a shocking sight. Joe Armstrong was a seasoned fisherman who had spent years along the icy waters of British Columbia, casting his nets for fish. He was lucky enough to work from the comfort of his home. On that particular morning, Joe went out as he always did, slapping waves against the sides of his small fishing boat as he navigated the known coastline. The fog lay heavy over the water, quietly eerie. And yet, nothing seemed different. Soon after, until something caught his eye as different. By this time, Joe had approached close enough to see among the rocks a motionless figure, black and white. He thought that it was driftwood or other large debris washed ashore. But as he came closer, his heart fell. It was no log, but a young orca lying on the jagged rocks, struggling for breath. The view was heartbreaking. The baby orca was hardly moving, its sleek black and white body scraped and bruised from thrashing about against the sharp rocks. Its large, soulful eyes stared helplessly, and it uttered faint, high-pitched vocalizations, almost as if calling for help. Joe could see that the orca was exhausted, dehydrated, and scared. The tide had trapped the orca in a small tidal pool, and there was no way it could free itself. Joe's heart pounded rapidly. He knew he had to act fast. The baby orca didn't have much time left to live. Without water to keep its skin moist and its body cool, the young orca would survive just short of hours in the sun. He had to act fast. He didn't have a minute to waste. So what did Joe do next? Joe sprang into action. He fastened his boat in place and then moved onto the rocks, crawling toward the orca very slowly. It was a very gentle but powerful animal. Joe knew this, although it was young. Its panic can make it quite unpredictable. However, Joe could not turn his back on this animal. The desperate calls for help and labored breathing of the young orca filled up the air. Joe took a bucket from the boat and started with this laborious labor of keeping the orca's skin moist. Orcas are very sensitive to the sun and its rays, and without cool water to regulate their temperature, their skin will start burning. He began pouring one bucketful of water after another down over the orca's body, trying to keep it comfortable while figuring out his next step. The hours ticked by and were getting closer to being desperate. The baby orca was still stuck there, its body forcefully held against the rocks by the tide. Joe could see that the energy of the orca was going, but not quite fading yet. Its moves were getting weaker and its calls quieter. Joe knew that he could not do this alone. The call for help. Joe pulled out his cell phone and called the Marine Rescue Center in the area. He described the situation and the grave state of the orca. The rescuers realized they had to rush. Within minutes, marine biologists, rescue workers, and volunteers began arriving. The coastal town got news of the incident, and soon more people came, excited to help in any way they could. The rescue team arrived with its special equipment and did an assessment. These rescuers knew that the baby orca could not be pulled out of the rocks without being further injured. They decided to wait until the next high tide, which would bring enough water to help float the orca to safer shores. But with hours still to go before the tide would rise, all they could do was focus on keeping the orca alive. Volunteers brought wet towels and tarps to cover the baby orca, while buckets of seawater were used to cool the orca down. This was a timed event with shifts to ensure that the orca never went an hour without water. It was a race against the tide. Everybody knew that if the tide didn't rise fast enough, the young orca wouldn't be alive. Slowly, the tide was rising. And do you think that would help it break free the young orca from its exhaustion? The suspense was building, and what happened next will absolutely blow you away. The rising tide, touch of hope. As the tide started to rise, the team prepared themselves for the last push. Slowly enough, the water crept closer to the rocks toward the trapped orca. Every eye was glued to the water as it slowly filled the tidal pool holding the orca captive. The baby orca, though weak, started to stir as it felt the water engulf its body. This is what everyone has been waiting for. The tide was high enough now, and it was the rescue team's cue to get into action. It carefully went around the orca, not wanting to stress the fragile orca anymore. With teamwork and precision, they started to guide the baby orca away from jagged rocks. For what could be agonizingly suspenseful minutes, one got the impression the newborn orca didn't have enough strength to swim. The team held its breath as it watched the young orca flap its tail in an attempt to gain momentum. But with a sudden rush of energy, the orca started moving slowly at first and grew in confidence. They erupted in cheers from the shore as the baby orca swam free, its body at last gliding through open waters. It was a triumphant moment for the team, but the orca's journey was far from over. The baby was still weak and alone, separated from its pod. Without the protection of its family, its chances of survival were small. A desperate search for the pod. Soon, the rescuers realized the most crucial step of rescue would be to return the baby orca to its pod. Orcas are much social animals and have an incredibly close family group known as a pod. For an orca calf, if it is separated from its pod, there may be strong chances of death. The pod protects, but also ensures that the young orca learns how to hunt and find its way in the shallow and very complex world of the ocean. Having rescued the baby orca, the team deployed boats and drones to search for signs of the orcas in the waters within the vicinity and listen for the familiar calls of the orcas. Hoping the pod must be around somewhere, the hours ticked by as optimism turned into despair. Had the baby's pod moved too far away? Would the little orca be left alone amidst the ovoid oceans with predators circling her? Miracle of the ocean, a family reunion. Just when they had lost hope, she heard it. A line of faint orca calls ringing out over the water. The team held its collective breath, silent with listening. There could be a small mistake. She was going to bring them word of a pod not far away. The baby orca, still exhausted from its ordeal, began to respond, vocalizing to it. In the distance, the rescue team soon sighted the pod approaching. The baby's family had heard its call and was on its way to be reunited with their child. The scene was pure magic, as suddenly there was a return of energy in the young orca, and the pod moved closer to it. Adult orcas surrounded the baby and nudged it with their noses, excitedly vocalizing in what seemed like a happy reunion. The team witnessed this family greeting its lost member into the group in wide-eyed awe. For Joe and the rescuers, it was a moment in time. Hours of effort later, they had not only saved the baby orca, but saw in that gesture the beautiful strength that was family and survival in the wild. How one rescue inspired a community and created a ripple effect. Within hours, the story of the baby orca rescue traveled throughout the coastal community and beyond. With it, this remarkable rescue effort gained the attention of all the news outlets, and the world was touched by its beauty. News of Joe, the fisherman who had discovered the washed-up orca, hit the headlines in local circulation. But for him, it wasn't about recognition, but about doing what needed to be done. It was the incident that would change his life forever. He respected the ocean all his life, but now saw it differently. The relationship between humans and sea creatures was far more intimate than he ever thought. Compassion and determination could finally bring about the survival of the baby orca, even in its time of great need when hope seemed lost with such overwhelming odds. The rescue inspired the community to take further action to protect marine life. Volunteers who had helped in saving the orca went further, involved themselves in local conservation groups, and spoke out for stronger measures to protect the wildlife in the region. This baby orca story could now be used as a symbol of hope, something that proves even the smallest action can create greater effects. This day turned out to be an amazing rescue from a day on the water that, at first, seemed quite regular. If you have been inspired by this heartwarming tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss another amazing wildlife rescue like this one again. Let us know in the comments what you would have done if you'd found the baby orca stranded. Curious about what happened when a group of teen boys decided to mess with a veteran? Check out this video to find out. You won't believe the twists and turns that followed.